Yo! Welcome to Inexpert Film Advice. I'm Deontay Jenkins, and here's what's on my mind. Quentin Tarantino is the greatest filmmaker of all time. Here's why. Before we get into that, if you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Ring the bell to be notified when new uploads are being posted. And check out some of the other videos here on this channel. You can check out my short film Cassidy by hitting the link in the description or clicking here or here. I've been watching these videos back and it always seems like I'm pointing to the wrong side, so here. And now that that's out of the way, Quentin Tarantino is a storyteller in the purest sense. His combination of genre-based action and unique dialogue have influenced filmmaking for decades. His films have grossed over $1 billion at the box office, and he's been nominated for 5 Academy Awards, taking home 2 for Best Original Screenplay for Pulp Fiction and Django Unchained. So check this out. Quentin Tarantino is without a doubt one of the most influential filmmakers that have ever lived. In fact, I rank him amongst the 6 most influential filmmakers of all time. Those filmmakers being Steven Spielberg, Alfred Hitchcock, Martin Scorsese, Stanley Kubrick, Akira Kurosawa, and Quentin Tarantino himself. If you're a filmmaker or even just a film lover, you've likely been influenced by one, if not all of these filmmakers. But Quentin is a little bit different. Exploding onto the scene in the early to mid-90s, Quentin probably has the most imitators out of any of the influential 6, or at least the most noticeable imitators, and that's because Quentin's style is so unique that it becomes very apparent when somebody tries to rip him off. If you've seen indie films, amateur films, or student films in the last 30 years, you've definitely seen his style. Snappy dialogue, stylized violence, non-linear story structures, these are all things that Quentin Tarantino is known for, and also things that people keep ripping off. Cut it out. We get it. You like him. It's cool. Do you. But oddly enough, he himself wears his influences on his sleeve. If you look at his films, you'll see influences from old Hollywood, Hong Kong cinema, blaxploitation films, grindhouse films, and a lot of times he's not just being influenced by those films, but he's making direct reference to them. But at the same time, Quentin isn't really biting or ripping off someone else's work. Quentin uses his influences like a hip-hop producer would use a sample.
Tell me why is it so? There's a very strange vibration. There's a very strange vibration.
Rather than simply just trying to recreate what he's seen, he takes it and makes something new out of it. Take this moment from Psycho. In Psycho, the moment was used to show Marion Crane being noticed that she's running away with money that she's just stolen. But here in Pulp Fiction, Quentin takes it and makes it his own. The key difference is the situation and the outcome. Quentin took something familiar and made it his own, but he left it similar enough for you to notice that he's making reference to Psycho. But that's the greatness of Quentin Tarantino. He can take this and make it work here, or this and make it work here. He can even take the structure of a novel and make it work for a movie. It goes without being said, Quentin is obviously knowledgeable in cinema, but what's even more impressive is how knowledgeable he is in storytelling. Filmmakers are storytellers, but often we like to separate storytelling into categories. This person's a screenwriter, this person writes novels, this person writes essays, this person writes articles, or whatever type of storytelling there is out there. But what Quentin understands that most storytellers don't is that a story is a story. And if you're telling a good story, you should be able to tell it across any medium, no matter what the structure is. And it's this kind of understanding of storytelling and structure that allows him to play with his audience so well. Have you ever paid attention to the way you feel in a Quentin Tarantino movie? Like really paid attention to it. If not, you should try it and you'll notice something interesting. Quentin likes to fuck with you, and in the best way possible. Quentin is so in command of his audience that he can make you feel conflicting emotions back to back, even sometimes at the same time. He'll make you feel suspense, dread, concern, anxiety, tension, joy, laughter, sorrow, sadness, before bringing you right back to suspense and finally relief. Where lesser directors struggle to make you feel one thing at a time, he can make you feel all of these things at once. And it can change on a dime. He can go from showing you the horrors of slavery just as intense as it's ever been shown on film before, to 3 minutes later making you laugh at the introduction of a new character.
I miss you like I misses a rock in my shoe. Now, I ask you, who this on that name?
And not only does he know how to do this, more importantly, he knows when to do it. There are some films that try to genre blend and shift tonally, but they fail and fall flat on their face. But somehow Quentin is able to do it consistently in a way that doesn't feel jarring or out of place. The tone of his films shift perfectly. He knows exactly what story he's telling and uses that to his advantage. He knows that the audience has likely been watching films their entire life and has a back catalog of story elements and plot points in their head. You know what I'm talking about. There are certain films, certain stories that you just know what's going to happen next based on things that you've seen before. Like in a sports film, you know that there's going to be a big game. In an action film, you know that there's going to be one final battle sequence. Quentin knows that we know movies, and because of that, he's able to lead you down a direction that seems familiar and then shift into a new direction. Take Pulp Fiction, for instance. The 3 stories that's being told there are not unheard of. We've seen the boxer being paid to throw the fight before. We've seen the thug that has to watch over his boss's significant other and keep his hands to himself. We've seen the gangster who wants out. We've seen all of this before. And we've seen all of it after. But what Quentin does is uses our knowledge of movies and stories against us. As an audience member, even if we don't notice, we're subconsciously guessing what's going to happen next in the film, based on things we've read, seen, heard, all of that. So what he'll do is lure us into that familiar area and then snatch us away to places unknown. And he has many ways of luring us into that familiar place too. He uses his cinematic tools to get what he wants from his audience. It could be a set piece, it could be a camera move, it could be a line of dialogue. He'll use whatever it takes to get you there and to take you away. Seriously, pay attention the next time you're watching a Quentin Tarantino movie. Notice how familiar some of the story beats are and then how it goes off into places that you would have never even thought of.
Being the director, I've always considered myself a part of the audience. You could leave the breadcrumbs that would indicate that you were going to go the way all the other films had gone. And then all of a sudden you make a quick left turn, and they're not prepared for that.
Now, a lot has been said about Quentin Tarantino's dialogue, and rightfully so. But what's rarely said is how efficient his dialogue is. You can say his characters ramble on about things that don't really matter to the story, but if you really pay attention, you'll see how effective and efficient it is at giving out story information.
Forget it, it's too risky. I'm through doing that shit.
That's all you need to know that something is about to go down. Now, it takes another 4 minutes to get to what they actually want to do, which only piques our interest more. And in the very next scene, Vincent and Jules are having a very entertaining but seemingly meaningless conversation. But you'll notice it's packed with exposition, but presented in a way that doesn't seem forced. They set up the Mia Wallace storyline, plus they establish the mysteriously violent character Marcellus Wallace, which in turn sets up the Butch storyline and enhances the ethos of the Jules storyline. Want another example? Take the strudel scene from Inglourious Basterds. In it, Hans Landa orders milk for Shoshana. If you remember back to the opening of the film, Hans asked for milk at the dairy farm that Shoshana's family was hiding at, before having them brutally murdered, of course. Through dialogue alone, Quentin has shown us that Hans knows exactly who Shoshana is and furthered the brutal mind games that he's playing with her. This is high-level stuff, man. He uses all of his cinematic tools to tell the story, whether that be visuals, dialogue.
We will be cruel to the Germans. And through our cruelty, they will know who we are. And they will find the evidence of our cruelty in the disemboweled, dismembered, and disfigured bodies of their brothers we leave behind us.
Music. Edits. Or all of the above. Quentin uses his cinematic tools to the fullest extent. Now, not everybody is so gung-ho on calling Quentin one of the greats. An argument I see online from time to time is that Quentin is the artsy filmmaker for the mainstream audience. Quora user Emmett Daltone said this: I know a lot about movies. At the very, very least, far more than your typical moviegoer of my age. College-aged and male, which was voted most likely to suck off the director in the Tarantino demographics yearbook. Tarantino impresses me, but a lot of things about his movies don't. They're indulgent. Some people see a writer-director being indulgent and think it's cool. I don't think it's cool to waste people's time so you can jerk off with some 35mm celluloid wrapped around your cock. Yikes, bro, really? He goes on to say, it's not that these more experienced viewers don't like Tarantino, they just aren't as impressed with him as people whose only exposure to movies are the MC f***ing you. Compared to that, yes, Tarantino is Scorsese. But when you've seen Scorsese, and no, I don't mean The Departed, you f***ing swine. Also, Tarantino is mainstream indie. People who've watched him, even people who could write a damn thesis on him, don't necessarily know anything about obscure but more rewarding filmmakers. They only feel this way because they've watched Tarantino like nobody's f***ing heard of him. Okay. Alright. Now, normally I wouldn't pay attention to things like this online, but this post has almost 1 million hits. Now, there are 2 things here. Well, 3. First thing is shut the f*** up forever. But the other 2 things are, first, the comparison of Tarantino and Scorsese. Martin Scorsese, who's another member of the Influential Six, is a completely different type of filmmaker than Quentin Tarantino. And comparing the two implies that there's only one type of acceptable cinema as art, which is completely false. Also, discrediting the MCU and The Departed implies that only obscure filmmakers making indie films or art house films can be accepted as great. I guess those two are a similar argument. But I still have shut the f*** up forever. Now, I watch 1 to 2 films a day, so I think I know a little bit about obscure cinema. And I love those type of films, but I can also sit down and enjoy Endgame, which had just as big an emotional effect on me as a film like The Mirror. What Quentin knows and what the snooty art film community needs to realize is that film is both art and entertainment at the same time. It's a spectrum. Some films skew more heavily towards the art side, some films skew more heavily to the entertainment side. But just because a film leans one way or the other doesn't make them any more or less valuable as a piece of art or a piece of entertainment. And there's no one that combines art and entertainment quite like Quentin Tarantino. But it's more than that for Quentin. He understands filmmaking, he understands storytelling, he understands that it's more than just an immediate process and it takes time to master, and you can't skip the process. The journey is more important than the outcome most of the time. It's things like that that separate Quentin apart from other filmmakers. Quentin is a masterful storyteller with a clear vision and a deep knowledge of cinema, which allows him to create and reimagine some of the best moments in cinematic history. All of these things, plus his ability to make his own unique brand of cinema, is why Quentin Tarantino is the greatest filmmaker of all time. But then again, what do I know? I'm no expert. Thank you so much for making it to the end of another Inexpert Film Advice episode. Once again, I am Deontay Jenkins. This was my second episode on my director series on why some of the greatest directors of all time are so great. You can check out the first one, link in the description. Paul Thomas Anderson is the greatest filmmaker of all time. If you have anything that you want my Inexpert Film Advice on, make sure you leave a comment down below, or you can hit me up on social media here. Don't forget to check out my short film Cassidy. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And gosh, is there anything else? I'm probably forgetting something, but I'll see you next time. Peace.